you, boys. What a game.
Welcome to episode 98 of the Maple Leafs Hot Stove Podcast. I'm Nick Ashbourne, joined as always by Anthony Petrielli. It has been a while since we checked in, but I don't want to say the offseason is over, but training camp is coming. I think it's time to check in once again. And the place that we're going to start today is with the goalies, because we have a little bit of actual business in the signing of Dennis Hildeby, and then a little bit of possible business in the reports about an Anthony Stolarz contract extension. Anthony, you can start on either of those, the real or the figurative. What is of greater interest to you?
I mean, Anthony Stolarz for sure, just because he's going into the season as the de facto number one. Like, I think all things considered, both goalies healthy game one, I'd have to imagine that Anthony Stolarz gets that start. Obviously they're high on Joseph Woll. His 3-year extension kicks in this year. He's 27. He's, to some degree, goalie of the future / goalie of the present. But they clearly rate Anthony Stolarz ahead of him at the moment. Obviously, he started in the playoffs. I think he was better than Joseph Woll, generally speaking, in his appearances in the playoffs. I don't know if they would have beat Florida were Stolarz healthy, but I do think Stolarz made a difference, and probably not talked about very much, by myself included, is how much better he is at playing the puck than Woll. I thought that made a significant difference in Florida's forecheck, and Florida just started rimming pucks around the wall at their leisure and just running the Leafs D-men because Woll is not good at playing the puck. So his contract negotiation right this second is sort of, to me, like Matthew Knies last summer, where it was kind of like, yeah, it'd be great to get a deal, but it's really hard for me to see that number coming together in a logical way that makes sense for both sides.
It's such a peculiar career path for Anthony Stolarz, because sort of on a per game basis, save percentage isn't the be all and end all of goaltending, but he throws up a 925 with Florida and then does even better 926 with the Leafs. And then, in smallish samples, you're talking about 24 starts and 33 starts, but on a per game basis, he has performed like an elite goaltender. But he's in his 30s and he's had his whole career to establish himself as a number one goaltender, and injuries have gotten in the way. He hasn't always performed, but you look up, his career numbers are really good. I think he gave them about all you could have expected last year, including looking good in the playoffs as well. And so you very rarely encounter a goalie who has been kind of elite, but does not have a track record of holding down a starting spot. And so, when you're looking at comps for him from a contractual standpoint, I think the ones that people look at, they look at Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson, because those are guys who were sort of considered tandem-ish guys at the time those contracts were signed. You could look at Mackenzie Blackwood, Joey Daccord as guys who are not super established at the time of the contract being signed. That puts you in the $5 million to $6.25 million range. I wouldn't necessarily hesitate to sign those. I mean, now term is a different situation, right? Because this is an injury-prone goaltender in his 30s. So you got to be careful with term, but I'd be willing to be relatively loose with the AAV, because he has shown it on a per game basis, and the cap is going up. And it's weird to say, oh, in Leafs land, the cap doesn't feel like a huge concern, but that's where we are at this particular moment in time.
So Stolarz is turning 32 in January. He's played 142 games in the league. I mean, that's not a ton. Now, on the flip side, I don't really even think this is controversial. I think it's a top 5 goalie tandem in the league right now. Like, I think they enter this season with a top 5 goalie tandem. Now, which one ends up being the guy, which guy gets, I'll always just say, I mean, I think they're going to make the playoffs, but, if they make the playoffs, like, who is the starter, up for debate, all of these things. But as a pure tandem over an 82-game marathon that's about to become an 84-game marathon in a year, I think it's a top 5 tandem, and I think that's an important thing to have. Now, you started throwing out all the comps, like you look at these guys, like even we saw like Kevin Lankinen and I know Karl Vejmelka's younger, but like there's a lot of these tandem 1A type goalies that are going for like these 5x5 type of contracts. And I'm sure Stolarz would sign that right now. If you offered him 25 million over 5 years, why wouldn't he at 32? If I'm the Leafs, though, am I offering him 5 years that's taking him to 37? No. And like, do I feel great about 3 years? And let's say you bump that number up around the 6 mil range. Also, no. So this is where I find it just, and the reason I don't is because that's taking him to 35. 6 million is good chunk of money for goalies still. And 35, the age 35 years, not something that I want to be paying that much money for. And I don't think it's that much of a discount. And you have Joseph Woll making way less, who's younger, and I still think is getting better. Like, I don't love that. Like, I just find it, again, it's like Matthew Nyes last year in the sense that people are like, lock him up, give him like 6 mil times 8 years. I'm like, why would Matthew Nyes sign that deal? If Matthew Nyes thinks he's good, and he obviously does, why would he sign for 6.5? I don't think he would have signed that last year. And then obviously he got what he got, like, almost 8 million a year with term. And that just seemed logical. But if you were to give Nyes that kind of deal last summer, I think it would have been an overpay. Like, I don't think they saved a bunch of money by waiting for him to have a good year and paying him as an RFA, but I couldn't really see a path to a deal at this time last year. Stolarz, it's, part of it, if you're him, is he is older. He has had trouble staying healthy. If you offer him something that's, let's say 3 years, I don't think 2 years would make sense for him to sign, but it's in and around 5 as opposed to 6. Does he sit there as someone who's like, I'm getting older, I haven't really played a ton of games in a single season type thing, and convince, himself to sign that deal? Or does he bet on himself, and then at the same time, amidst all of that, he has to also sit there and think Joseph Woll is going to get starts next year. Like,
well, that's a huge part of it, right? Like, there isn't necessarily upside for him to prove he's a different type of goalie this season. He might prove that he'll stay more healthy. Like, that's probably the best he can do, but he's not going to be able to this season be like, oh, actually, I'm that workhorse that I've never been, because Woll is going to be a big factor for the Leafs.
He's basically betting on Joseph Woll getting hurt at that point and
Not
playing
a terrible
like 50
bet,
games.
traditionally.
It's not a terrible bet, but it's definitely a bet, right? So that, like, hey, we all have insurance for various things in life. So if you're sitting there going, hey, you don't have to deal with all of this. Is Woll going to get hurt? Am I going to be able to push 50 games and get like my payday at 32 and blah, blah, blah? It's like, hey, do you want $15 million over 3 years kind of thing? Like, that kind of deal makes sense to me. I don't know if he would sign it. As they say about free agency, everything is a year too long and a million too rich. Does it eventually hit that point for him? I don't know. If he plays 30 games again, 30 some odd games, it was 31 last year, or 34 last year, sorry. But if he plays in and around 34, 30 games, our team's going to line up to pay him? I don't know. But at the same time,
betting on more than 40. Like, you can, whatever, 50. I think he's betting on that he can say, I was the guy who at least started most of the season. Like, that's what he's hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, like, if his numbers are unbelievable, but he plays 32 games, I don't know how much he's getting. I mean, free agency is always stupid, but like, it's again, so it's just a hard one for me to kind of come together and go, well, unless Stolarz like really, he's just like, you know what, I like it here. This is a good situation. I'm in a good tandem with Woll. This is a good hockey team. All of these things that matter, like, he played for London, OHL. Not that that would matter, but like, he's, obviously familiar with Toronto. Like, he chose Toronto. He did have other interests last year. If, like, all of these things kind of like matter to him, and he's like, you know what, I'd rather just stay. This is good money for what I've done to my, my career to date, and realistically, like, what's ahead of me, then great. But like, none of us can answer that other than Anthony Stolarz. And if he's also sitting there at 32 going, I want to break the bank, how can you really blame him, right? Like he's never been the guy. Like his career earnings are around $11 million.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting situation because, as I said off the top, I don't think they're clean comps. Like he's had a very unusual career, but I do think so that makes it harder to make a deal. But on the flip side, I do think that both him, like you kind of laid out some of those reasons why he might want to cash in now, lock in that money now. I think it's a good situation for him. I think it's a good situation for the team because they've invested in Wolves such that they don't want to necessarily even go out and get, a 55 game horse. That's not
No.
necessarily an organizational fit for the Leafs. So Stolarz is exactly what the Leafs want. He's someone who is on a per game basis going to be really good, but not necessarily demand so many games that their investment in Wool doesn't make sense anymore. Like there's no better fit for the Leafs than Stolarz in the medium term. And like
And conversely, there might not be a better fit for Stolarz than the Leafs. Like it's a great fit. So that's the kind of I agree with them in broaching these conversations now. I'd be doing the same thing. Like, where's your head at? Like, we want this to continue. Do you want this to continue? How much is that going to cost us? Like, all that makes sense.
And I think matching his contract length to Wolves would also make sense. Just be like, okay, for the medium term, this is what we're going to do. It worked so well in year one. We believe, maybe over time, Wool becomes the better goalie and Stolarz declines a bit, and Stolarz is making more money, whatever. That's kind of the way it works. It's timing. It's when you hit free agency. It's when you're able to cash in. And yeah, I think that like a 3-year contract would be really good. I mean, if I'm him though, I would see $5 million and I would consider that to be a disappointing number based on the goalies who are floating around that. And I get that the durability is a concern, and I get that he hasn't started a ton of games, and it's a risky proposition with his age, but I don't know. I feel like if I'm his agent, I can get that number over $5 million, or I'd feel disappointed if I wasn't able to.
I don't know. Does he have, I mean, I think he only gets that like a lot more than that if he starts a good chunk of games and then he's like really good in the playoffs.
But I think
Like,
again, we're talking about way more than I actually, like I said before, I don't think there's a huge range here. Like I think we're talking between $5 and $6 million realistically. Like it's not massive, which is part of the
si-
reason why I don't think
six
it's
and a
like a huge.
half.
That sounds really heavy to me. Again, Aiden Hill coming off his run is going to get less than at a significantly younger age is going to get
That's the
less
thing.
AAV than Stolarz. Like
It,
most of these comps I brought up are also younger than Stolarz, even if Stolarz is better.
like Aiden Hill is still just 29 years old.
Yeah, so that's for me, like that's an absolute ceiling on what would make any sense for this contract. Like if you're paying him more than Aiden Hill, I think you're getting hosed. Which,
Yeah.
the Leafs
But
have
if it,
gotten hosed before, and they probably will again at some point. But I don't.
but that's a longer deal, but I think that deal also takes him to 35. So again, like it's just a bit of a tricky contract to navigate. It's not as straightforward as some of the other ones. Like even if you look at just like Jake McCabe and you're like, we're gonna keep you. And like what's the total number? And let's stretch this out over X amount of years to get there. And the Leafs deferred some money. I mean, man, if they could defer money for this one too, like rip every loophole until they close them, which they're about to anyway. So I mean, if you could do it and it's like it's 5 mil on the books, but it's 5.5 mil kind of thing, I'd offer them that too if they can pull something like that, or just go full Kawhi and be like, come to a tree planting event and we'll toss you a couple mil. Like,
I mean, yeah, if the Leafs should have been swimming in those waters for years with the financial advantage they have. Yeah, I think it
maybe they have been.
maybe they have. I don't know if they have been. They've been doing a poor job of bringing the contracts down. I do think it's worth touching on Hildeby. Obviously, a depth piece, but it's a 3-year contract. It's a commitment that he's going to be the number 3, and that it doesn't make sense for them to invest in another one. And it's an interesting one because he's got 73 games in the AHL at this point. He's performed well at that level. We don't know what he is in the NHL. He's been shaky and very short duty. He's always mentioned he's a big guy. You can't take that away from him. And, he looks like a pro, but also both of these guys that we're talking about, both Woll and Stolarz have these extensive injury history. So like the guy who's number 3 for the Leafs feels a little bit more meaningful than it does for other teams because you lose one of those guys for a couple of months. And this was a real problem for the Leafs at times last year. Like, what is your confidence level that this is a solid bet in someone, considering I think the Leafs are going to need this guy a little bit more than some other teams need their 3?
I mean, I like the general plan. I mean, I just personally, I always view goalies sort of like quarterbacks. It's like you got to keep drafting them. You got to keep having them in your system. You got to churn them out, right? And it's just been the Leafs have been just historically bad at it as an organization. And honestly, it's one of the bigger reasons that they've been so up and down as an organization over the years, right? It's like you look at Philly, like they're the same way and they're going through it. They're just like you need to be able to develop goalies and you constantly need to have options with them. And right now it actually feels like pretty flush. Like you have your veteran in Stolarz. Hopefully they find some sort of middle ground and are able to extend his tenure in Toronto. You have Woll, he signed for 3 more years, like including this one, and he's 27. You have Hildeby, he's 24. Like they're taking him to 27 and they're saying like, look, you're getting a minor league salary for the first few years of that, but realistically, like you're gonna play NHL games. Like the odds that Woll and Stolarz both stay healthy all year are very, very low. Like, okay, one, sure, but both, very low.
Not going to happen.
So I like that. I like the development plan, but I will say and then they have, I'm not going to pronounce his name right. So I'm just going to say AA, Arthur, who I also think has actual promise. Like he was really good to start last year in the Marlies, and then as the season went on, he wore down, which is what a ton of young guys do when they play pro hockey over here for the first time. So like, there's a little bit of a pipeline starting to form, which is nice. I am a little bit surprised though that like there's no real like veteran hedge. Like over the past few years, we've seen it. Matt Murray, Martin Jones. Now Matt Murray wasn't particularly good this past year. I loved the story and I rooted for him really hard. I mean, obviously he didn't steal that, but I'm surprised to some degree they haven't put in a third. But it's hard. Like you're gonna, it's like James Reimer's still on the market. Are you gonna call him and be like you're gonna play in the Marlies like sparingly, but like if one of our guys gets hurt, like maybe you're coming up over Hildeby, or maybe not if Hildeby's really good. Like it's a tough sell. So, I mean, it could backfire. Like we could be sitting here in a few months going, one of the 2 guys is hurt. Hildeby's getting starts. It's not going well. Maybe the offense isn't as potent as it has been in previous years to make up for that. Like there's definite risk, but I like in general how they're building like a actual proper goalie pipeline. We just have to see if it, like I'd consider Woll a win for the system. Like he's a 3rd round pick. He's a really good goalie. Like I think they're positioning Hildeby very nicely to be a next potential win.
Yeah, I think in the longer and medium term, like making sure that he stays with the organization, making him sort of part of the plan, I generally agree with. Like he's given them reason to believe there's something there. As you said, I think the downside is in the immediate term where something happens, early in this season and they need Hildeby to come up. Like he just hasn't proven that he's a functional backup at the NHL level like this second. And that doesn't mean
Hildeby started the 2nd game of the season last year. Like,
yeah, and that was a good game. And then
that was the only good game.
Yeah, exactly. Beyond that, it was tough. Now, it can be a fluid situation too, just because right now we imagine a world where Hildeby comes up, and that's most likely scenario. You also don't know who might be on waivers, who might be available for a trade for like a negligible asset. Like these things have a way of working themselves out if it goes horribly wrong. Like there's no world where I think they're gonna like be forced to play Hildeby 25 games because there's a ton of injuries and he's terrible and he's unplayed. Like if he sucks, they'll figure it out. So I don't think it's that big a deal. And yeah, I think he's an interesting piece to keep in the organization and see what he can do. And as you said, traditionally speaking, having one functional youngish goalie has been difficult for the Leafs. So having 3 potentially is, is a nice place to be. And potentially, as people have hypothesized before, a place they can trade from in theory, although, we'll see how the season plays out before we start planning the trades.
It's
I
hard to
know
know how much value a goalie has. Like I get it, but
teams have to like them. Like it's
it's
very subjective.
the
Like a
the
team will
beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Like
absolutely
really, it's
big
tough.
time. I know that you did over the last sort of weeks or so, you've done series kind of sifting through the Leafs depth chart, like where the roster is today. Not that much has changed since we last recorded. A little bit has changed. Um, as you kind of sit here and, we're on the brink of training camp, where do you find yourself, I don't know, surprised, happy, satisfied, dissatisfied with the Leafs roster compared to, when we were running through the deals they made around July 1st and what we thought the team would be?
Yeah, I mean, like I like the makeup of the bottom 6. I feel like the top 6 is a bit of a question mark. I mean, it has 2 elite players driving it, obviously in Matthews and Nyes, and then I just
How
sit
you
there
say
and wonder
Matthews
if,
and Nylander?
or sorry, Matthews and Nylander, not Matthews and Nyes. You're
I
right,
was like,
Matthews and
wow,
Nylander.
really
No,
elevating
no,
Nyes
no,
and
no,
dumping on
no,
Nylander.
no. I really like Nyes, and he's obviously a good player. But I kind of look at it and go, I can see the vision. Like if Dakota Joshua rebounds to his contract year, and there's fair reason to think that he might. Like obviously he had testicular cancer, like he missed the start of camp, which is hard for guys. He comes in, mid to late November. It takes him a while to ramp up. He got hurt again. Like there's reasons to sit there and genuinely go, that was a bit of a write-off year for him. And the previous year wasn't just a contract year. Like he showed like he could be a good contributing player and who was also very good in the playoffs. And I know it's like, well, he shot 21%, he scored 18 goals, but he didn't even play 65 games. Like he was playing to like a 32 goal pace that year. Like it was much more than just 18 goals given he also missed time that year. So I like you could see him being good. Matias Micheli was a Calder finalist and he had 2 really good productive years. And then he had a really bad year and like, his center Nick Bjugstad was terrible all year. He also was a guy who got hurt, came back, never really found his game for the year, was healthy scratched as a veteran. Lawson Krause, terrible year, also healthy scratched. Like, and they moved to Utah. He just never really found it. They have like a million small forwards on that team. And he was the one that just kind of played himself out of that rotation. So like you can look at both guys and say like I could see both of them being good. Like both of them, fresh start, a little bit of a burr in their saddle or point to prove that they were traded for relative peanuts, both of them. I think Nick Waugh is like actually just a solid hockey player. I don't think he has anything to prove. I think he's just like a legitimate top 9 forward. He was when Vegas won the cup. He's been generally productive his entire career. I don't like no notes on Nick Waugh other than I just think he's solid. So you can like kind of see the vision, but then I also sit there and go like, what does this look like when it's bad? Like, what does it look like when Micheli's doing the stuff that got him benched, which is like overpassing, trying like ridiculous cross ice stuff through like 5 guys, and Joshua's, not driving to the net hard and, doing things that can contribute offensively and basically just taking shifts. Like, what does the team look like at that point? Because they haven't really added a dependable scorer. So then are we sitting there going, well, it's now down to like, can Matthews and Nylander and Nyes carry the mail as well as 35-year-old John Tavares? And like, is guy like Bobby McMahon going to bounce back? So it's like, yeah, like if everything goes well, I like the team. If ever, like, and then I kind of sit there and go, well, what's the middle ground? Like, what's going to go well and what's not? And then part of me also sits there and says, I think they have enough guys that it like enough quality players that it should balance out a few players not hitting. And I include Scott Laughton in that category, who's going into a contract year, who wasn't good enough after they acquired him. He's acknowledged it a million times, which is newfound territory in Toronto, just saying like I wasn't good enough and I need to be better. Unheard of here for past like 8 years. And like he's a bounce back candidate. Like he also is in that mix of like he needs to be way better. I just there's just a lot of question marks for me essentially.
Yeah, I think you hit on what I wanted to get at, which was the idea that there are enough sort of quality forwards in this mix that if something doesn't go right, then there's a counter move that you can make. Like if if they try Domi on the first line and that doesn't work, then there's other things you can do. If Joshua starts on the third line, that's probably the best fit for him in theory. If he gets hot, like maybe there's a world where he plays further up the lineup. Like that's definitely a possibility. McMahon, we know he can survive and thrive on that second line, but if he looks like he did for the back half of last year, struggles to produce, then there's room for him to be more of a checking player. Michelli, yeah, he can be in the top six. He also, yeah, in his career has played surprisingly defensive roles. Not that he's like a great defensive player, but he's lived on
Yeah.
lines that take defensive zone faceoffs at a high rate, and you don't have to necessarily, have to shelter him all the time. Domi, I think, is the most interesting piece. He's not the most important piece, but he's the most interesting because like there's a world where he's
He
on
could be
that.
the most important if he's playing on the top line
Well,
amongst that mix. He would be the most important de
Well,
facto.
among the most important, yeah. Like I think there's a world where he has a great season on the first line, and that's mainly where he lives. And he plays a role in the power play, and he puts up way more points than he has ever as a Leaf. And when he signed his contract, my thought at the time was that deal only makes sense if he's Marner insurance. Like if he's not Marner insurance, he's going to be overpaid on this contract, and if he is Marner insurance, it might just work. And that doesn't mean it will work. Just because Marner left doesn't mean the
Yeah.
insurance policy is going to work, but at least it could
I,
make some sense now.
I know the clips going around of him and Matthews practicing together this week. And I mean, it makes sense. Like they genuinely have been good together. And like a loser, I actually went back and watched the one game that they played together in full, which is when Mitch Marner missed against Calgary. Nylander had a hat trick that game and was sick, by the way. But Domi and that line looked really good. Like they do a good job of controlling play. It's interesting. Like the subtleties in Matthews' game when Marner's gone are very like to me. I think they're significant. Like Marner loved pulling up high because there was you didn't have to fight through anything. Marner loved going to the blue line and to the space instead of to the traffic and the tough areas of the ice. And you see Matthews pull up a lot higher because Marner's not doing it. And I mean, realistically, who do you want with the puck on the point and a shooting lane? Obviously, it's Matthews. And if you look back at the year before when that Bertuzzi Domi line with Matthews was together, against Washington, he scored, I think he scored twice like that, and one of them was disallowed. Like you could see him just like a little bit more active pulling up high as opposed to trying to like work around Marner with, who obviously had the puck on his stick a lot. And, to his credit, like Marner is third among active players, up to like 600 assists or whatever he's at, 500, to like McDavid and Crosby. So like obviously Marner's a really good playmaker, but Matthews a little bit more assertive. Like he just has the puck on his stick more. Like even in the neutral zone, like he's the guy that's swinging to the D man to get the pass as opposed to Marner. Like it's just like little things like that, but it just leads to more touches for Matthews. And the 6'3", 230-pound franchise centers who I want swinging low to get the puck in the neutral zone and who I want to have a shooting lane up top with knives in front to rip one. And so, that Domi, Nyes, Matthews line actually looked really good against Calgary. They scored. They kept them together the next game against Seattle. They scored again. But Marner came back and they force-fed Marner on this line with Tavares and Nylander and made Nylander play left wing. And it was just a line of like, nobody is going to forecheck. And it's a video game line, not a real life line. And it played like that. But they won the game. So they kept it together the next game, which was in Vancouver. And the Matthews line was good again. That Tavares line was not. And the Leafs were losing. And by the third period, they just reunited Marner with Nyes and Matthews. And that was basically the end of that until the middle of March, where that was the only game where we saw the Leafs split up Matthews, Marner, and Nylander across three lines. And the Matthews-Domi line scored again. Nylander scored and Marner did absolutely nothing on that line with Tavares. And then we never saw any of that ever again. So I don't know. They played like 3.5 games last year together and they scored 3 times and they didn't get the full game the other time against Vancouver. But if you go back and watch that game, they had a ton of chances and probably should have scored in that game too. So I don't know. Like, again,
I
like
think
it's
there's
just,
enough proof of concept. Like
yeah,
when I think of them, I think mainly about, again, that run you mentioned with Bertuzzi, Matthews, and Domi is a line. Like that was a really
yeah.
good line together. And I think that Nick Waugh being a part of this team plays a big role in this because some of the counter push I've seen on like, oh, Domi can't play on the first line. And like, this is where I'm staking my position. I'm a Domi on the first line truther. I'm saying that today. Like, that's what I believe. That's the way this
It's
team should be structured.
it's legitimately insane if he doesn't start on the first line, in my opinion.
But I think there's a real chance that doesn't happen. And there are people who
And
push
it's time.
back. Yeah, agreed. And so people who push back will say Domi's not good enough defensively to be on the line with Matthews. But the whole idea of having Nick Waugh and having a much more competent third line is that Matthews doesn't have to play defense all the time. Like having Matthews and Marner together is a
Yeah.
great luxury for the coach to have to lean on, say, this is a tough situation. I know who I'm throwing over the boards. But at the end of the day, like you can give Matthews just a little bit more breathing room, make his line a little bit more of an offensive line. And if Waugh plays the way he's expected to play, the line that he plays on, as long as it's not crazily composed with like absolute weirdos, like there's enough defensively responsible third line type players on this team that whatever that composition of that line is, that should be able to soak up some difficult matchups and not make Matthews like the only option in these tough spots. And then, yeah, maybe Domi will get exposed occasionally, but also the center is going to have a way bigger impact on the defensive makeup of the line. Like just because a line has one winger who's not great defensively doesn't mean that it's like doomed and it's going to get absolutely flamed in its own zone every time.
My biggest issue with it is what I said last episode, just to be consistent with it, which is Domi's failing up. Like he wasn't good last year. We've said this a million times. Like he wasn't. He mailed it in for like 4 months. It was tough to watch. We'd sit here and people all the time would get comments or questions or emails like, "Why are you so hard on this guy?" I was like, "Are you looking at the effort that he is exhibiting? Like it was non-existent for literal months, just out there doing cardio, and he's talented." He's legitimately skilled. Like he was among the leaders in primary assists just a season earlier. Like he has had a legitimately productive career. For all the other things you can say about him, he produces and he has produced for a very long time in the league, and he has some level of jam to him. We didn't see the jam and he wasn't producing. Like, are we going to go a third straight year where he scores his first goal in December? Like it can't happen. But the reason I sit here and go, he's got to be on the first line is basically everybody would be failing up. Matthias Maccelli had 18 points last year.
Yeah,
Joshua wasn't good.
Steven
But
Lorentz earned that shot by being a
yeah,
beauty. Like
like
that's not how you got to put a guy who's going to produce in there.
are you putting Kalle Yarncroc there? Or was he good? Like what? Like who was good? You can sit there and then say, well, Nylander was good. Sure, but then are you going to have Tavares with Domi and McMahon or whoever? Like whatever. You can make whatever combo you want after that. It's not good. Not a single team will take a single second thought at a Tavares-led second line at 35 with like whatever other veterans that are not Nylander or Nyes on his wing. Like that's not a winning formula. That's just you have a $13.25 million center. He's got to take one of these guys and say like you're going to be good this year. I'm going to make you good this year. That's what you're paying him to do.
I feel like if I could pick out this podcast, what have we talked about the most over the course of, 2 seasons now? It would probably be how the Leafs can spread the talent through the lineup better to pose a greater threat. And so the thing was like, can we get Matthews, Nylander, Marner on 3 separate lines? Basically, like that has been a consistent talking point because they shoved those guys all together. It's limited what they could do in the bottom 6. So then now when Marner leaves, you want to put Matthews with Nylander? Like, no. The whole point of this version of the Leafs is in theory that we're going to have an actual third line here. Like if you're going to be excited about the Leafs, it's that you have actual third line, you have actual forward lineup depth. That's the reason to be bullish about the Leafs. So let's
Yeah.
not shove Matthews and Nylander together. Like, I'm sure there'll be a moment, late game, whatever, offensive zone face-off with 45 seconds left in the period. There's opportunities to do it. It's not like it's never going to happen, but from an architecture of the team perspective, that would make no sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, and then to tie this together, I was going to get to this at some point, but like a large part of this forward group is, again, like I basically look at every guy and say, like, in a vacuum or a fishbowl, this is a fair bet. I think Joshua rebounding is a fair bet. I think Michelli rebounding is a fair bet. I like that they've bought low on a 24-year-old that was a few seasons removed from being a Calder finalist and was among the most productive players in his draft class up until laying an egg last year. Like, I think it's a good bet. I like it. I like that they got younger. They added, like, he's talented. He's definitely skilled, right? Like, I like that they added, just a genuinely solid top nine forward in Nick Waugh. Like, I like all of these things in isolation. I think, again, Scott Laughton, I think, is a fair bet to play better. I'd be really surprised if he was that bad again. Like, I mean, he was playing to what, like a 16-point place with Toronto? I would be stunned. That's what he threw up in a contract year. Like, everything else aside, like, I don't think a veteran who's been like generally productive or like reasonably productive in his career is going to be a 16-point guy ahead of free agency. Calle Yarncroc even falls in that category for me, right? Like, he's a pending UFA. He's generally been like a double-digit goal scorer in his career. Like, if he's playing, and I don't know if he will, I don't know if he's even going to be on the team by the time preseason wraps up. But if he's there and he's playing, I'd be surprised. Another guy, contract year, veteran. Like, I'd be surprised if he wasn't productive, if he's in the lineup. So all these guys, I think, are reasonable bets, which is a roundabout way of bringing it to Craig Berube, who really has to, like, he's got to figure it out. Last year, they essentially found this formula where, our top guy, it was pretty similar to Sheldon Keefe in the sense that our top guys are going to carry the mail and our bottom guys aren't going to get scored on. Like, that was ultimately what it was. It was like, the difference is the bottom guys, and honestly, even the top guys under Berube, largely parked the bus. Like, how many times down the stretch of the season where they literally had a period where they, like, shot attempts would be like 25-8. And Berube would be like, we weathered the storm. And I'd be sitting there like, you're at home and Florida was missing 4 starters. What do you mean weathered the storm?
They weathered a lot of storms over the
Yeah.
course of his first season.
Like, that was ultimately what they became, which was, a bit of a rope-a-dope counterattack. Like, when they were beating Florida, like, a lot of their goals were rush goals, right? Where they just like blitz them early and then they essentially park the bus and they'd score like a few goals on counterattack type things. But then as the series went on, Florida just started dominating play. They stopped getting scored on at the beginning of games and they took over the series. Like, he has to evolve that team. Like, they did a lot of good things. Like, they genuinely were good defensively. Like, their goaltending was awesome, but I do think that they helped make their goaltending awesome. Like, it wasn't just the goalies were good. Like, they were very good at clearing the net. Like, if you look at, like, even that game 6 win against Florida, they gave up nothing. I think that was the game in the entire playoffs for all teams that was the least amount of chances, high danger chances given up. Like, they were legitimately good at protecting that area, and they did have the talent to say, like, these guys are going to probably go down the ice and score a few night in, night out, and they did. But, like, this can't be that. Well, like, he needs to create 4 lines. Like, this has to be like, we're coming at waves.
A lot of especially what we were talking about in the playoffs, was like the formula for this team a lot of the time is elite power play production and great goaltending. And that's how they would win, theoretically. That was a lot of the way that the route to winning games, especially against great teams, where, the fact that they have these 4 guys was not going to razzle-dazzle them. And this year, you have the same goaltenders, and I think it's fair to be bullish about those goaltenders, but it's also fair to think that there's a chance of a step back there. Like, both of those guys were playing more than they had in the past, and even Stolarz has been great for 2 years, but it's been small samples, and goalies are funky. And, with the absence of Marner, I think it's also fair to assume that the power play is going to take a step back. So when those are two pillars of, and maybe not, fair to assume, maybe not a
Is it?
guarantee, not a guarantee, and like playoffs, non-playoffs, that's a whole delineation that we can talk about when March rolls around. But there's no doubt that Marner was really good on the power play last year when he was running the point, and they're
He
not
was
going.
really good at it.
There was not going to be a player that they can put in that spot who's going to give them equivalent value there, I don't think, on this roster. So you're going to need to find edges over other teams in different places because those elements of the team at least have a chance to decline. And that's, Treliving said it in his, very moneyball of him. He said it in his comments recently, like you can't replace Marner, you have to replace him in the aggregate. Well, that's what this looks like. Replacing him in the aggregate is having Waugh and Michelli and Joshua. And, those players might not even replicate his point total, the three of them or whatever, but they probably will. I think you'd like to think they will, but there's a chance they won't.
Depends
And
what Michelli does.
yeah, but the idea of having, a quarter of your forwards have competence when, there's times last year and in previous years where the fourth line is giving you nothing, third line's giving you nothing. I mean, we fixate on the third line here because Waugh feels like a bit of a difference maker, but there's enough players that the fourth line also has a chance to give them more. Right now, Lawton and Lorentz feel like two guys on there, but that could change if Lawton gets moved up. I do wonder about some of the pieces in terms of like we talk a lot about how you distribute this talent. There's also just who's going to be there and not be there because when we spoke, in July, I think the assumption was that, a Yarn Croak would potentially be gone, a Camp would potentially be gone. And then there's, a little bit of talk right now about Easton Cowan, and we'll see where that goes. But I don't think we even have a very good grip right now of like who the 12 forwards on the ice would be in the first game because it still feels like quite a bit can change.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as 14 guys, and all summer I've kind of been like, yeah, I mean, they really should move someone. But the more I'm looking at it, I'm just sitting there thinking like they don't have to do anything. Like they could just keep all 14 to start the year. And two guys, no matter what the two are, two guys that have played in the league and been like solid players in the league and have been paid to be solid players in the league, now that even Nick Robertson's making reasonable coin, are going to be sitting and pissed off. And that's not the worst problem to have. Like, again, this comes down to Berube managing it. Like, it's, he's got to show a little bit more flexibility in the lineup and moving things around and finding combinations. And there were, the odd time where he would do that or injuries would force his hand. But, I look at it more as, okay, if you're starting Domi on the top line in games, fair enough. We've beaten that one to death here. But if you're winning that game with like 8 minutes left, does Nick Waugh move up to that line? And now you got 6'4" Nick Waugh, you have 6'3" Matthews and 6'3" Nyes closing out games for you. Like, is Scott Laughton moving up in what checking role? Does he move up beside like Tavares and Nylander in those kinds of situations? A bit more of a defensive conscious compared to Bobby McMahon or whatever the case is. Like, is David Camp in there? I don't know, right? But like in-game adjustments depending on the scenario, but then you also have to kind of balance the like I want to go crazy, just constantly blending things up. So it's a fine line, but he's got to get 14 down to a logical 12, and then he's got to get 12 into positions to succeed and contribute to the team. And it's not easy. Like, you could look at this lineup or at least I could, on any given day. If you ask me 100 days in a row what are the best line combos, you might get 100 different answers from me based on, it's probably not going to be that many, but it's going to be something quite significant. Like, you just kind of, the way you're balancing it and looking at it. And so I'm very curious to see how Berube handles it. I'm curious if Treliving's able to move a body, if he even has a desire to right now. Like, I think there'll always be chatter about Yarncroc and Camp. Camp would make sense to me just because he has another year on his deal, and obviously they didn't even play him in the playoffs anyway. Yarncroc, I mean, would seem more like a plan B to me. Like, they played him in the playoffs. Like, Berube liked him. Like, he moved him up to the second line a ton of times. Like, Yarncroc never he was hurt all year. Like he never found his game. You can say that his game's never been good in the playoffs, and that's fair, but he's generally been a productive regular season, honest NHLer. And he was genuinely solid for them on the penalty kill. Like he did make a difference for them, including in the playoffs. Like he was a good penalty killer, which is something that they need. And he's a right-handed shot, which is something that they lack. So I don't like it's not a complete picture. There's a bunch of pieces that I like. You kind of need to see how it comes together. And then amidst all of that, like Matthews needs to drive the bus. Like he's
Well,
like
that underlines everything, right?
Right.
Like,
That's the whole thing.
Matthews season.
Yeah. Like a healthy Matthews this year, to me, lays waste to this league. Just lays waste to it. Like it's been a little bit disrespectful this year or this summer in terms of some of the chatter about him. I think a healthy Matthews is going to remind everyone who he is and what he can do. But he needs to be healthy. And he's saying he's healthy and he's saying, he's better. I've actually quite enjoyed, like, I saw he went to like Brampton Hockey Night in Canada. I saw something of like a fan that collects like cards and stuff was invited to come watch him skate, hang out with him in the dressing room and stuff. Like, I feel like he's doing a little bit more of these like community outreach things that are critical to being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs and part of the responsibility of being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'm curious to see how the whole thing settles in this year for him, because he needs to be the guy.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's been so difficult, is that's the thing that's most important, but that's also a thing that there's kind of the least to say about. It's like, we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, it's just like, he has to be good.
It has to be good, has to be healthy. Like, what's there to say about it?
No further notes.
Even though, yeah, like we'll spend 12 minutes talking about who's forward 13, who's forward 14, because like that's a huge conversation in a sense. But what really matters is Matthews. On the flip side, we have no insight other than he better be good.
But and they've generally, and if you boil down those, the three guys, Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, over the years, they've generally been good when one of them has been hurt. Like, it's not really a problem. Like, Matthews is a clear top 10 forward for me. And Nylander is not far off. Like, he said 40 goals or more in 3 years in a row. Like, he was second in the league in goals this year. Like, I don't think people talk about that enough. Like, I see people talking about like player shots in the league and like things like that. I'm like, Nylander easily has one of the best shots in the league. Like, he is beating goalies so clean. Like, he's taking their lunch money
off the wing all the time.
Like his goal in Game 6 against Ullmark, cooked, absolutely cooked him. Like that goal was like borderline embarrassing. How easily he ripped that by him. He got one look at it and it was over. Like, he had 3 points that game to close that series. Like, he was unreal.
And I think there's an element of, Matthews scoring less and Nylander feeling like he had to be more of a goal scorer and less of a playmaker. Like, I feel like he kind of took some of that on too last season.
Nylander also took on a lot of crap. Like, how many games did he play with Pontus Holmberg last year? That was his top 6 left winger in the playoffs against Florida repeatedly. Like,
you don't have to remind me how shit Pontus Holmberg is.
Like, I actually don't mind Pontus Holmberg in a depth role, but like he was played way over his head. And I actually don't like that they just like didn't qualify him and lost him for complete free. Like, they couldn't get like a 4th round pick for him. Like, he had a market. Teams were interested. He made $1.5 million, 1.55 over 2 years. Like, how couldn't you get a 4th round pick? And people will say, who gives a shit about a 4th round pick?
Who cares? I mean, it's sloppy asset management.
When are the Leafs, especially lately, in a position to be like, nah, we don't need extra draft picks? That one rubs me the wrong way in that sense. But yeah, all these guys, I'm sitting there going like, Nylander's a stud, Matthews is a stud. When those guys are healthy and they're in the lineup, I think it's a really good team. But if one of those guys is missing, I don't know.
That's fair.
It's like, ask you a question. So to me, like, I actually think their power play, the biggest issue for me with Marner missing is actually entries. Marner was actually pretty good at it. Like, he's shifty and he reads the ice well and he could gain the zone. And sometimes I just find Matthews has real problems gaining the zone. Nylander's generally good at it, but like can get a little crazy at times. Like, he can just, He's a freewheeler. He's a bit of a spirit out there, right? He's a wild spirit. Uh, but I think he's good at it. But like I think entries is probably a bit of a concern for me. But once they're in the zone, like you have two elite half wall guys and Matthews and Nylander. Tavares might be the best bumper in the league. I think he led the league in mid-range goals in the high slot last year. Like he's got a heavy shot. Like he's sick there. And Nyes is obviously fantastic in front of the net. Like that those four things are more than enough to have a really good power play, provided they can gain the zone. But let me ask you a question, which is the question I was going to ask is, and I felt like I needed to qualify that. If one of Matthews or Nylander are missing, who goes on the half wall?
Oh,
It's
oh
not
man.
great. No matter what you're going to say, it does not feel great.
Like Domi has a pretty long history of power play production, and his shot isn't as bad as his goal totals would lead you to believe.
No, you can shoot.
So,
But are you going to feel good about that?
not great, no. But I
Not
mean,
great.
again, if Matthews is injured, then we have worse problems than the power play is missing a guy in the half.
I mean, that was largely how they survived his absence, right? The power play got clicking. They had Marner and Nylander on the half walls. Riley was up top, and it was fine. Like that carried them through that stretch in November in particular. Like their power play was really good. And so, look, these are like deeper down the season conversations. It's really just to say, like, yeah, like you could say Matthias Michelli, like he's a high-end playmaker in theory. Like you can, but none of them feel great. And so I look at the roster and say, like, when it's healthy, I think there's enough there that it should come together. And it's anchored by two elite forwards. And I think there's solid secondary guys, if you want to call them that, in Tavares and Nyes. They need some other guys to step up. Which ones it's going to be, I couldn't tell you. I think ideally down the line, obviously you want them to add like another quality forward to the mix at minimum. Two might be pushing it, but definitely one they're going to need to add if they want to be serious in the playoffs. Otherwise, like they should be able to put together an actual third line of consequence for the first time in years, right? Like whatever Domi and Nick Robertson ended up being 2/3 of their third line 2 years in a row, whether it was Yarncroc on the wing with Keefe or Bobby McMahon this year. And that line was unplayable against good teams. Against like actual good hockey teams, that line was terrible.
Consistently, yeah, it couldn't be trusted. You'd end up with 11 minutes of ice time, and
They
it wasn't
sucked.
producing that. It was
Yeah. Against a lottery team, great line. Probably a goal. Like you need that. Hey, you need that again. Like you need to pick up points against those teams. So great line against bad teams. But once you played real teams and things kind of dialed in, that line was unplayable.
I feel like we can sort of breeze over the defense of it all here because nothing has fundamentally
It's
changed. But
it's really just to say I'm disappointed they didn't do anything to it. Like I feel like they need another guy that can move the puck.
and that's what they themselves have said too. Like that's what Treliving has said that they want better puck movement back there. And I guess Morgan Riley can be better, but they're thin in that regard. Like there's not an obvious
If
in-house solution that's gonna crack the lineup and change the mix.
if you think Henry Thrun can do it, then great. I mean, he's 24. He was really good on Harvard. Like he was a reasonable prospect. San Jose sucks. I can at least listen to the argument for a second, but like I'm not buying it. Like they probably need another guy that can move the puck, like actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think Thrun's an intriguing dart throw, but
Yeah.
I'd rather have him on the roster than or not. Well, yeah, on the roster than Ryan Reeves, but beyond that, like it's not a type of player you can count on. It's a type of player that could break right for you. And, there's quite a bit of that on this team. I do think as we get to the end here, and we've sort of pushed us down, and as we were discussing prior to recording this podcast, there's a lot of discussion about how much air to give this and where to place it in the podcast. But Mitch Marner having a sit-down interview with Mark Masters and TSN has created a ton of, I don't know, buzz sounds a little bit too positive, attention in the market. And I feel like we do need to touch on that a little bit. And, it'll probably be the last time that we talk about Marner in some time because he's off to Vegas, he's doing his own thing. It was I don't know, I'm tempted to say it was an odd one, but in a sense it wasn't surprising at all. And before we get too far into it, I do want to like throw the important caveat out there that like it's not okay for people to fucking dox him. It's not okay to throw shit in his yard. Like it does suck some of the things that he's been through, and like it's really unfortunate. Hopefully that doesn't reflect most people. Like all the disclaimer stuff is true. It's not just like obligatory bullshit. Like it's true that that shit sucks. But there's also like, there's more to the story.
Now that I've said that.
Now that I've said that. Like I'll say like not my whole piece, my brief piece, and then I'll give it to you. Like to me, this interview felt like an attempt to win a PR battle that was already so far lost that it felt kind of pointless. Like it is a shame that this stuff happened to him, but it didn't, like he's the one who brought this forward with nobody prompting it and it not being in, like this happened in the past. It's like this interview in my mind didn't really need to happen. And to me, it seems like him again trying to win the PR battle, trying to gain sympathy. And like I kind of feel like to what end? Like he's already gone. People feel the way they feel about him. So at the end of the day, it just strikes me as kind of pointless in a sense. And maybe that's not a dramatic enough response to this. I know people had a kind of vitriolic response, but to me, my first instinct was just to like sit down this interview, watch it a couple times, and I'm like, my thought is like, why did this need to be a thing that exists?
I hate talking about this guy now. It's just, at the last episode, I referenced having some thoughts and then we never really got into it because it's just kind of like, just tired of talking about him. They're genuinely tired of talking about him. But, staying consistent with his entire tenure as a Toronto Maple Leaf, he does this to himself and then looks around and goes, what did I do? Why is everybody talking about me? What's the problem? Like, obviously he didn't have to go do that sit down. And how many sit down interviews did he do with Mark Masters in his entire Leafs tenure? And he just happens to do one now in the summer. How many podcast appearances has Darren Ferris made in the past like 5 years?
Not many.
Can I count them on one hand? Is it just one finger? I think we all know which finger that would be if that was the case, like at that point. I mean, it's just clear as day as to what they're doing, which is I'm sure he's getting a tough time for leaving his hometown. I'm sure he hears some of the, vitriol his way. Despite his repeated attempts to tell us that he's not on social media and doesn't pay attention to it, he is very much on social media and very much pays attention to it. And if it's not him, then it's his camp sending him stuff all the time, or it's his security team, or it's whoever else. Like he is very much aware. As much as he told us he wasn't all these years, he is more aware than everybody else. Like I am very much online and aware of things that happened. I did not ever see this address post. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying I personally did not see it. I don't know about you, Nick. I'm like very much like tuned in to chatter or conversation, whether I engage in it or not. Like I'm very much around it. I feel like I would have seen a screenshot of it. I feel like I would have seen something. The point of whether it happened or not is really not what I'm saying. It's more to say like I don't think that this was like some viral thing that I just somehow missed. Unless you saw it and I never even asked you.
It may have come down very, very quick. Like it may have been an incredibly small moment in time. I can't parse that months later.
And then yeah, I just kind of look at it and go, he's just never been accountable his entire time in Toronto. Like his whole time, which is where I think a lot of, I was trying to like pick my words carefully as we kind of go through this, but his entire tenure to me as the Leafs, and I think people look back and say like, oh, like did they like learn lessons of how to manage it and like blah blah blah. And like honestly, the lesson should have been they should have just cut bait a long time ago dealing with the nonsense that they did. He's all the way from minor hockey, like with his father, like there's been problems with him and teams. through to London, leaving the first week of the season there and sucking out and all these things. But you dealt with it because they won and he was really good. And then he got here and he was really good, but they didn't win. And then eventually that just kind of becomes untenable. You're like, we're dealing with all this constant crap, but you're not winning and you're not accountable to your role in that. And then you sit there and get defensive and look at the market or whatever you want to pick and blame that. And you never just look at yourself and internalize it and go like, well, what role did I play in everything that happened there? And I think that's kind of indicative of his game. Like I know I kind of sent it to you in jest before the game, before this podcast, sorry, um, about his presser after they lost to Montreal in the offseason, where he was asked, like, is he going to change anything in his game? Like, he was terrible in the playoffs that year. Like, just objectively, he was terrible. And he was asked if he was going to change anything in his game. The first word out of his mouth was nope. And then he just went on some rant about getting scoring chances. And somehow his line created energy for like, oh, you know,
He's
what,
known
20?
for those bone rattling
Yeah.
hits that
Thank,
create energy. That's
thank you
traditionally Mitch Marner's game.
for over $20 million. You too can sign a line that gives you energy and no offense in the playoffs. And, you know, it was just like, it was tone deaf. And if you look at his game from that time to now, like nothing's changed. Like he plays the exact same way, which is like, he's a really good regular season player. He avoids traffic and contact and he won't go to anywhere that's dirty. And he just avoids all of it. And he plays the exact same way today as he did 5 years ago, as he did 7 years ago. Like not, I don't think much of his game has evolved. I think he's just always been a really talented playmaker with good vision. And that's basically what he is right now. There was a point in there where like his shot got better, like genuinely, and he started scoring more, but it's essentially the same player. Whereas I look at a guy like William Nylander, and there was a ton about Nylander's game that I disliked early on in his career, like a ton. And to me, Nylander is a significantly better player today than he was 5 years ago. Like the way that he controls the puck and muscles guys off and the way he drives the net, like he loved to loop the net before. Like now he puts his shoulder down or puts his arm out and like he actually drives it. And that's why he's been one of the best goal scorers in the league 3 years running. And so all that to say is like there's just always been this lack of accountability and always this like sort of like why like you know just I don't know what it is, like an ignorance or something to like his role and everything. And, you know, a lot of people saw through it. Like we say this a million times, like this isn't a stupid hockey market. Like it's not. Like people know. And it just pisses people off because they just constantly see it. And they go, you know, they see the holdout as a rookie and the threats to sign an offer sheet in Columbus and, you know, like, am I going to go to Switzerland? And then signs this way above market deal and then doesn't produce in the playoffs and then is defensive in every interview and, you know, never just sat there and said, like, I got to be better. It was always push the attention off me. And then that brings us to this one where it's finally like, oh, like, it's like the fans and, you know, playing that up as like a main reason for like the shock and awe of like why he left. The summer before, he said that they were treated like gods. Why didn't you, if it doesn't add up? Because with Mark Masters, he was like, this has been going on for 2 years. But then in the middle of that 2 year tenure, he waxed on about how well that they were treated by fans. And, you know, at the same time, according to him, it was like, I want to stay in Toronto. Why'd you want to stay then? If it was so bad for 2 years, you could just left.
Yeah, I think, the market thing, obviously that gets people going because the fan base, I think if he had performed and if he had had that accountability, people would have embraced him. It's not like he was doomed to not be embraced.
Yeah.
He said in the interviews, like the market was tough on all of us at times. We had to lean on each other. It's like, I didn't really see, I didn't see William Nylander getting crushed under the burden of the market or Auston Matthews. And in other sports, people go to big markets and they play. And a lot of people talk about like try being a New York Yankee, try and being Aaron Judge, Try being like basically any NFL market, but try being like a Philadelphia Eagle or a Kansas City Chief or
I
whatever.
legitimately don't think this market's tough enough. I
New York
guarantee
Giants.
you when he comes back in January on the Friday, it will not be nearly as venomous as people think. I guarantee when they put on some sort of like tribute at the first commercial, which I would have to debate not doing personally, but that's just me. Maybe I'm petty. I guarantee he will get a good mix of cheers. Like it will not be straight boos. They will not sit there and boo a tribute video for a minute. I
He,
promise you they won't.
he might get one quasi sharp question from Steve Simmons. That will be like the extent of
Wow,
his.
that must be tough. That just
Yeah.
that big bad Toronto media, your one hard question from Steve Simmons.
But
As
it's the accountability thing, right? Like in this interview too, he said we had so many teams that fell short. It didn't happen. Like when I was a kid all the time, I would say things like, and my mom would know this. I don't think she listens to podcasts, but I would say stuff like, "Oh, the vase broke," or like the glass dropped, and she'd be like, "Nick, the vase didn't broke. Like you broke the vase. Like the glass didn't drop. Like you knocked over the glass." And that was like a big bone of contention between me and my mom, except I was 10. Like this guy is a grown man. And like that, I think, is what gets to people. Like he never, and it was so easy. Like it's been so easy for him to say at a certain point, I was brutal out there. Like I need to be better. And then you get that clip of him on TV. And we're all professional lip readers, but it sure seemed like he's yelling at his teammates to wake the fuck up. And
oh,
then
that's exactly what he said as he
yeah, I
played like
mean, it's
shit.
yeah, exactly. And there's like 100% chance that's what it was. And it's just kind of like it's the lack of self-awareness, it's the lack of taking accountability. I don't really begrudge a contract as much as some others do, but like people feel that way about it. And it's just this whole package. And like I didn't listen to the whole Darren Ferris interview, but I clipped this one quote that I thought was interesting where he said, "You can't blame the fans. They react to what they hear, and sometimes it's misinformation. We could go out there and attack every message out there that was incorrect. You just give those people credibility, it creates a bigger storm. It was difficult to manage and difficult to get through." Like, this is as if there's some kind of organized media propaganda campaign against Mitch Marner. It's like, even if there was a world where like a bunch of rival media companies who don't like each other were like, let's all gang up on Mitch Marner. As you said, the fans aren't stupid. The fans have all the stats available to them. They watch all the games. Even if the whole media was saying, oh, Mitch Marner is actually fantastic in the playoffs, it's not like the fans would buy that. Like it's just a wild statement to me that there's this implication that like the media, some kind of anti-Marner agenda. The media doesn't have an agenda. It's a bunch of disorganized dudes who are trying to do their best. That part of it. I mean, I know that he's not Ferris, but obviously Ferris represents him, and like
Oh yeah.
that was just like, come on, man.
Look, the craziest part about the Darren Ferris interview, podcast appearance, whatever, to me was when he went all the way back to the Mike Babcock era to reference Mitch not being treated properly or fairly or whatever. And I forget if we talked about it, but Nick Kypreos wrote a piece basically about how like Mitch Marner was like mistreated as well, like months ago, like before he officially left in free agency. And he referenced it too. And I mean, breeders can, or listeners can go find that piece if they want. But that piece, which I thought was like full of issues, I think Alec even wrote about it, um, is like exactly how the Marner camp feels. Like I think that piece like parroted a lot of their feelings, and then Ferris also talking about Babcock kind of falls into that category, and I just kind of like get over it. I mean, it was like 6 years ago. Like, at what point do you let it go? Like, if honestly, if that is still bothering you, if Lou not giving you your bonuses after you then got way overpaid by market value, you can say whatever, he lived up to his contract in terms of value of whatever, but in terms of market, he was overpaid. Period. End of story. I will not have this argument with you or anybody. He was overpaid. Every other comparable winger was making like $9.5 million. Straight up. There's no argument to be had.
There's a projection and a COVID of all
Stop
that.
it,
That's
Nick. Stop
complicating
it.
it, but
Stop it. Don't embarrass yourself. He was overpaid. And so that like, but they sit there and it's like you're still whining about Lou bonuses. You're still whining about Babcock treatment. Like at some point, get over it. Like get over yourself. but he was never over himself. It was always like an ego play. And honestly, the craziest thing about everything that's happened this summer to me about it, like him going on the master, like, yeah, let me pull over. I'm going to make sure people, put my PR spin on my leaving. I'm going to make sure my agent follows me up with one, right before it, just in case that message didn't get out crystal clear. And all of the handling of everything is how, like, nothing has come out about Mitch from the Toronto side and how much of a problem he was at times for them. Because to sit there and listen to him like bemoan certain situations or treatments is like, and to not account for any of his, not just his role, as we've just talked about, but some of the crap that he did on his end, which is very much relevant given, he wants to throw stones from a glass house. The whole way that has played out, I'm actually floored because for months on end, I would hear from like various people, and it's like, if he leaves, like there's so much like to talk about from his end of things. And we haven't heard like a single word. And so, you can sit there and track it back to various things, like talks that he would refuse to go to certain spots on the power play, right? And you saw that with how they awkwardly moved him around at times, like that he didn't want to play down low. He wanted to play on the half wall, but the Leafs had Nylander and Matthews, and Marner couldn't shoot well enough to justify it. And then you saw them move him to the bumper, which was extremely awkward and terrible. And then he would just kind of like roam around. And then eventually he made his way to the point, and he was really good on the point, like full marks. Like I really liked Mitch Marner on the point of the power play. But they did this like whole awkward song and dance where like he didn't want to go to certain places, and like they had to try to find things for him to do, and it was weird, and like it never really worked in the playoffs. Like he has one power play goal in his entire playoff career, which is crazy. And like that was a problem. And then you start to hear about like some of the toxicness of like if things went like poorly at certain times, and how he constantly like compared himself to Auston Matthews. And that goes back to the contract right out of the ELC, right? Like his comparable was Auston Matthews. He always fancied himself side by side to Auston Matthews, which 32 out of 32 GMs are taking Auston Matthews over Mitch Marner. You can't find 1,000 people in hockey. If you go through 1,000 people, you can't find a single one that are taking Mitch Marner over Auston Matthews.
I think like the fans, even aliens who watch like one game and don't know how hockey works. Like there's a difference between what an Auston Matthews brings and a Mitch Marner. It's not comparable.
But he constantly compared himself to it, right? And like his camp was coming out at times like that with going like, we're not taking $1 million less than Matthews. Like Matthews signed for that. We're in that territory. And that was what that whole negotiation came down to. Even though he was a winger, even though he was coming off like a 69-point season, where Matthews had a 40-goal rookie season that you can't even compare to. Again, a problem. Then you kind of go through some of the, the dictating of ice time and line mates at certain times, a problem. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't have an issue saying it. It's like this year, there was a point where I was really harping on Matthews and Marner playing together. Like there was a point early on where I was like, this makes sense. Like Nyes is getting way better. Like they should have this like amazing top line that can run teams over. You still have Nylander on the second line. Tavares is still producing. This is logical to me. But then as the season went on, like they weren't dominating games. And we were, as we referenced earlier in the podcast, like they were just having long stretches where they were getting actively outplayed, like way too long. And you would expect if you have a big top line where you've played your best left winger, your best center, and your best right winger all together, that they go out there and they tilt the ice back and they regain momentum and they get all the shots. And the tipping point for me, which like really bothered me just kind of watching it play out, was when they played San Jose a few weeks in a row and Macklin Celebrini outplayed them twice. Like you can get the first one. You got young kid, he's talented, he's hyped up. He outplays you. He gets the better of you. But you play him a second time and he outplays you again. unacceptable. Like he's 18. Like you should be cleaning his clock out. Like you guys are 10 years older than him. It's his first year in the league. That's unacceptable territory to me. And like I think back to Matthews and Marner when they first entered the league and they played Chicago and they were, a few years removed from their like 3 cups and whatever. And Taves just cleaned them out. Because that's what you should be doing to a young guy entering the league when you're like an established star. So anyways, I harped on this fairly significantly. And I actually got like a message from someone who worked for the Leafs for the majority of Marner's tenure, but not last year. And I was saying, like, how do they keep playing these guys together publicly? Because they're not producing good enough results to justify this. And the message was, we cannot, or like the Leafs will never split them up because Marner will have a conniption. That's the exact word, conniption, if they do. And you go through and you look at, we talked about it with the spreading it out, right? They never did it. And then if you go back and you look at certain instances of how things were played out, it always ended up catering to Marner. It was like Marner missed a month and the Leafs went with Matthews, Domi, and Bertuzzi. And Marner comes back and the first thing they do is Marner starts the game, shift 1 with Tavares. And it was a Saturday night game against Montreal because they had to cater to him. And which was everything that he was about. And you go to certain lengths of certain situations, right? We talked about there's one game this year where they split those guys up across 3 lines. The other 2 lines scored. One guy, like, he wasn't good that game. I was at the game. Like, I was excited. I was like, holy cow, I actually get to see this like spread out live. It's against Ottawa. March 15th. It was terrible. And then they reunited it back for the third, right? That line with Domi this year was good. They scored back-to-back games. But that Tavares, Marner, Nylander line was terrible. Broke it back up, status quo, call it a day, right? And it's like there was this large catering to him on their end where I'd be sitting there right now. And I actually think the Leafs have handled this like fairly well. Like they really haven't said anything, but Tree Living did make a point to come out and say like, we take our players' safety seriously. And that's pretty much the extent of it.
This is the right thing to like. There's
100%
no reason to get in a pissing match with Marner.
No, but like there was a large catering to Marner as well, and like some of it is like purely ego driven, from his agent to his camp to the player himself. Like he came at like Ferris. If you listen to part of the interview, was like, I was pissed at the teams that the Marner trade came out publicly after the deadline. And I'm like, do you know how many times this happens? Like, get over yourself. We hear about speculative deals that fell through all the time. And this was a massive one. Of course someone's going to find it.
Yeah, there's so many different people who are involved who can potentially know about that. And then they have connection. Like, it's an unfair expectation to be like, oh, it's my client. It's Marner. So everyone needs to shut the fuck up. Like, it's not realistic.
Yeah. So the reason I flagged that story is I think there were certain things, and people can like look back at the timelines and histories of certain things and you can see it, right? It's like Babcock mistreated me, beyond the list and all that. Like Marner got pushed down the lineup at times, right? And he wouldn't play on the top power play unit with Matthews and Nylander and things like that. And Sheldon takes over. And what do we see? Matthews and Marner attached to the hip, Marner top power play unit, Marner spoon-fed all these minutes. And yes, he was good. Like there's no arguments to it. He was genuinely good in the regular season. But then it never ultimately paid off. And then things would go south. And then when it came time for him to take the accountability on his side of things, it was defensive, it was abrasive, it was never accountable. And so yeah, I don't know. Like ultimately, like we started this talking about the Marner Masters interview. It's just like another chapter where it's just like how appropriate. Like you can just never get out of your own way. Like it would just always about you and how you felt you were mistreated and everybody was against you and all these things. When in reality, I just look and say like everyone wanted to love you and everyone wanted the team to win so badly. Like that was it. People wanted the team to win. And you always had this like petty, vindictive things going on, whether it was Lou didn't give you your bonuses, Babs didn't treat you right. Am I playing with Matthews? Am I getting my minutes? And all of these things that, like, that's not about winning. And that is not what fans want to see. And that's not what inspires fans. And that's not what buys fans in to the team and the organization. And long after players are gone, the team remains. Toronto Maple Leafs are still going to play hockey this year, still going to play hockey next year, even though Mitch isn't here. And, you know, like those are the things people are going to remember. And when people remember other players that we hear them speak fondly of, you know, whether it's like all the way up to Doug Gilmour, who was like incredible for a few years, to, you know, grinder type guys like Darcy Tucker, like the things that people remember is like those guys associated with like, we really wanted to do it. Like we made sacrifices, we put our body on the line, we did this, that, whatever. And I don't know if you can ever look back at his tenure and say like he genuinely made sacrifices for the greater good of the team. I just ultimately look at it and say it was really about him. And then when they didn't win, he was like, and that was me putting my hands up for anyone listening to just the audio, just going,
Yeah.
what do you want me to do? Nothing.
I think that, you know, the story of Marner, whether it's on the ice or off the ice, is that like it was there for him, right? Like he played on these teams that were constantly in the playoffs. He had the chance to be this hometown hero in a way that basically no one has ever been for this franchise. He played with, in theory, stylistically, the perfect player for him to play with a lot of the time. And, you know, even putting aside the component to which that was, you know, pressured, like a lot of times he earned those minutes too. Like he was a first line caliber winger.
Yeah.
And he was
But
never,
was he like so sick on the penalty kill that he had to be like PK1 all the time?
no, but for sure. And honestly, that was inadvisable because they overused him and like that backfired. But you know, the possibility was always there. And like off the like I'm trying to think of an alternate world where you do this interview. Like it's so easy to sit down for this interview and say, like, this was one of the hardest decisions in my life. Like
It's
I
so
love
easy to
this
not do
city.
the interview, Nick. I don't
Well,
want to
like,
talk about it. Let's move on with our lives.
sure, but even if you do the interview, like it's easy to say, like, it breaks my heart how things went here. Like I wanted so much to be one of the people, not the guy, one of the guys to bring this championship to this city that deserves it so much. I grew up, I know what this means. Me and my family are getting this new start. This is the new chapter we need, and like this will always leave a bitter taste in my mouth that it didn't quite work out here, and it sucks. And I wish that I could have done more to make it happen. Like it was so easy to do that. And like that, like it would be so easy for him not to shoot himself in the foot over and over again from just a engagement with the world, the fan base, the market perspective. Like he didn't have to be he didn't have to be like the most charming man alive. He didn't have to be the most charismatic dude there's ever been. Like he could have said basically the stereotypical hockey things with like a little sprinkling of I'm from
Did,
around here, and he would have crushed it from a PR.
did John Tavares do a sit down interview with local New York Islanders media to discuss his exit the summer that he left?
I mean,
Did
not that I know of.
how many high profile UFAs do this in general?
Fair.
None. Like he just I don't know. Like we talked about it in advance of free agency, where I was like, yeah, like I'd like to keep him, but like he'd have to take less money, which he probably won't do. And there needs to be one of the things said back then is like there needs to be some accountability on his end. Like he needs to come here and say, like, I'm not leaving like this on these terms. Like we started something here and I'm gonna finish it here because that's where I'm meant to be. And like there needed to be some like concession. Like
He's
right.
one of
And
those guys who's unwilling to take an L. Like he
no.
cannot be
And
seen to take an L in any circumstance.
and you're just listening to the past few weeks and it's like literally impossible for him to just sit there. Maybe it will in Vegas. I don't know, with less pressure. I don't know, like pressure, there's always pressure to win. Like if that team doesn't win this year and the new playoff salary cap really hurts them in any potential hope to get Alex Petrangelo back, like if they don't win this year, like Eichel and Dorofiev are getting massive raises, and they're going to be in tough to fill out the rest of that roster. So like there's going to be pressure in Vegas. Vegas doesn't win. Like they don't care. Like you know, you might not have the same fan pressure, and he probably won't be as online as he is here because he probably just doesn't understand the market and like where to go and things like that. Um, but like there will be pressure in that organization. Like you can never escape it. But like there needed to be that accountability from him, but it was always something else. And like that's all it the disappointing part for me, and I get it from the Leafs, like they're sitting there going like we're betting on the talent and like, you know, you're gonna mature over time and like figure it out. Like you look at again, like William Nylander to me is like a great example. Like he really matured over the past number of years. And it's significant for them. Like he was unreal in the playoffs this year, generally speaking. He wasn't good in game 6 and 7. But up until that, like the 6 and 5 games and like who he was playing with and what he was doing, and he had 15 points in 13 games, like he was really good. And you never saw it from him. And like that's the most disappointing that it just like it never like rounded into what was required. And whenever you saw opportunities for, you know, him to do something that was like different to him or go somewhere on the ice where he's not used to or sacrifice his body, like he just was very, very much unwilling to do those kinds of things. And then, you know, he leaves and it's kind of like a shot at the fans. And, you know, I know just like talking to a few other like to me that is a shot at the fans like that's painting like a black eye on the fan base. And you know, I see like comments from like other fans at various social media posts like classic Leaf fans and like things like that. And like I don't think that's true. Like I genuinely don't. I've seen tons of Leaf players out in the public market. Like these guys are I've honestly never seen a Leaf guy harassed in public, and I've seen them like fairly regularly. I saw Scott Lawton a few weeks ago at my cottage, like not at my like at like the public docking area, and no one said a word to him. He was hanging out with his kid, who looked like I don't know a year and a half or something. They were on the boat. His family was getting ice cream. Nobody said a word, and you could say, well, no one recognizes Scott Lawton. It literally said his name on the boat. It was engraved on the boat. No one said a word. No one bothered him. I know he's not as high profile as Mitch Marner, but wasn't, you know, I saw he did an interview with the Leafs Nation, and he was like, yeah, like it's good in the market. Like, you know, families here, like it's really not like the perception. And like, I don't want this to become like a thing where it's like, you know, players got to be weary of coming to this market and it's tough on them. I think by and large, like players really enjoy the market. You know, there's a ton of attention on the team. Like you're not competing with an NFL team. You know, the Leafs are clearly the number one team in the market. They travel insanely well everywhere they go. Leaf fans are in the building. They make their presence known. They're loud. You know, maybe not at Scotiabank, but you go out anywhere else and they're there, and it's noisy. And I also just look and say, I think Marner's kidding himself if he did the things that he did here in most other markets, he also would not get away with it. And I forget if I ever said this story on this podcast. Like I went to one of the Leaf games against the Rangers this year against MSG. Did I ever tell the story? Yeah, just a quick one.
Hard to say.
But the very first shift of the game, Marner tried some like 360 pass, like it was dumb. And so whatever, we're like watching, we're like just like settled into our seats at Madison Square Garden, like a decent chunk of Leaf fans. And some fan, as soon as he makes like the 360 twirl pass to nobody, just yells out, just like a playoff game, eh, Mitch? And I turn and it was a Rangers fan in a Rangers jersey. And I was like, they know? It's like everybody knows. Like the whole league knows. Like there's no secrets here. Like if you did that in New York, like they wouldn't take kindly to, you know, making that money. Like Panarin and like certain guys there have gotten that team further than the Leafs have gone and competitive, but like they're tough on them. Like to your point, like this idea that like playing in Toronto's tough or, you know, certain components here that like, I think this is actually quite a tame market. Like I said, I think I'm honestly betting when he comes in January that he's going to get a good chunk of cheers, probably more than he deserves. And I don't think it's going to hold a candle, honestly. I think people think that the Tavares one was bad and that this one's going to be worse. I actually think it won't even come close to the treatment that Tavares got in New York. I don't, I don't. Like, I genuinely don't. I think the fan base will be like pretty tame about it. I think there'll be a good chunk of like Marner supporters that buy the story and they just take it at face value without like any additional like critical thought as to Marner's role. Um, Not to, receive certain messages or things like that, but in his overall role of alienating himself from the fan base and the city to which he grew up in, which is very relevant. Yeah, I think the whole thing, I think it's honestly, it's going to be a lot tamer than people think. I'll be floored if it's like nasty. I don't think it will be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And we're going to have to wait and see how that goes. I think this is a good point to wrap. I think earlier we talked about how we weren't going to talk that much about
It's,
Mitch
I
Marner,
hate that we have to talk about it, but like, there's so
but
much to
that
say. It's
this
just
might be the last time at this
like,
length.
I
We'll
just,
see.
I hope so. I mean, he's probably not going to do an interview before he plays in Toronto because they play the night before and they probably won't do a morning skate and all that. And, after the game, he'll probably just spew some crap and hopefully that'll be the end of it. But yeah, like, I don't know. I also say I would love the team to come out and be a little bit more chippy about it. And maybe they internalize it and maybe they work towards it. But like, I don't know. If I was Matthews, I'd be pissed. I'd be like, we started this and like we haven't won shit, and you just like bail and leave because you think it got too hard. Like I'd have this, and then you start hearing people like saying like, well, how's he gonna play now without him, and like things like that. Like, God, I pray that he comes in with a chip on his shoulder and just a massive one, right square on the shoulder that just demonstrates how good he is. Like I don't think that he's good. Like I know that he's good. But like to me, like the team should be pissed. I'd like to see that come out when they play him. I think there should really be, yeah, like I think they shouldn't take it like well. I don't think they should sit there and be like listening to him putting out crap that they're now going to have to answer for, right? Like they're
Well,
going to get questions about the market because he's saying this shit.
the two biggest open ice hitters on the Leafs, I would argue right now, both residing on the left side of the defense, Jake McCabe and Simon Benoit. So, when Mitch comes back around, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, ultimately it's just, yeah, it didn't have to go that way. I still have like a million things I feel like I could say on it, but I just, there's a lot of delusion there on half of what happened, and anyone who buys their stories on them being the Marner camp and Ferris and what they're trying to put out there, if I'm sure some of those things happen, but they also played a significant role here. Like they're kidding themselves if they think otherwise.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, as you said, it could have gone very differently, and to have a player, homegrown player, end up kind of, as you say, putting, or at least trying to put a black mark on the fan base and on the market itself. It's sort of the exact opposite of how you'd think this sort of thing would play out. And yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting when we get some distance from it, how people end up feeling about Marner. But it's funny. I was thinking about, we're talking about Darcy Tucker and players who are like loved by the fan base. And like in the future, I kind of feel like I might see more 16 Darcy Tuckers than Marner jerseys, like in future seasons, even though he's
But
far less consequential.
but what was the bar for loving them? That like they gave a shit and they associated with the fan base, and if things didn't go well, they owned it like adults. And they just put it on the line, like period, end of story. They put it on the line. And I don't know. I look at the end of like his entire tenure and say he didn't, and he just had no interest in being accountable to that and looking at himself and saying like, what can I change? And when you make that much money, you need to lead the bus on that, which is also, again, I know I can say a million things. I'm going to end on this note, but I did find it particularly funny when Freeman said like, if they won that game 7, like I think they would have found a way to like for him to stay and to make it work. And I'm sitting there thinking, so hold on, you're making $11 million. You're like supposed to be the second best player on the team. You think you're just as good as the captain. Your dad also whined about that in the media too. And you're sitting there going like, well, I'm playing like shit. So if the other guys win this game for me, well, I do nothing, which he did. Like he was terrible in that game 7. Awful. Maybe I'll stay. Like, where's the responsibility on your end? It's not like he can't sit there and say like I was unbelievable in that game. Like I did everything in my power. Like you can't look at any series. Can you look at a single game last playoffs and say Marner was sick? Like a single game. One. Like where you're like Marner was like unreal that game.
Like when I think back to Marner being great in the playoffs, I'm thinking back to like the Tampa Bay series a couple years back.
Unreal. So the year age
Yeah, like
28, $12 million. You can't look back at a single like I could look back at like 5 games and say like Nylander was like unbelievable.
for sure.
Like sick. Like Nylander was like he was the best player on the ice. Like Florida completely changed their matchups because Nylander was just absolutely having his way with the start of that series. Like he was unbelievable. But you can't look at a single one and go back and say like you can say he was good and like that line was fine and like all these things, but like you can't look at a single one and say like best player on the ice, Mitch Marner.
Well, we'll see if that changes. Maybe in Vegas it will.
Maybe, but
I don't think that'll invalidate or really change the story. Like, regardless of what happens in the future, I don't think it really matters. I think they'll try and make it matter. Like if Marner ends up
for
getting a
sure.
cup or something, I think that they'll try and rewrite the history of what happened in Toronto. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because what happened in Toronto happened for close, a
It,
decade basically. And
it's hard to watch and then to hear his comments and then just like the whole situation and think that it was ever going to change here by the end of it. Like by the end of the playoffs, I was kind of like, why pay this guy? Like, how many years are we going to see this same shit? Like he's
yeah,
not like it's not getting done. Like what you're going to keep paying, you keep having a bottom 6 that sucks. You watch Florida's third line work you while the top guys don't score nearly enough to hedge it. Like, and then he whines about how he was wronged. I don't know. I just, yeah, can't get can't get
well,
to it.
we're gonna see it. We're gonna see how it looks. Not too distant future. We appreciate everybody who is listening in, watching on YouTube. Now that that's something we do. I don't know if I can promise all of y'all exactly when we'll be back. We'll see how the schedule goes, but we will get going with the season in a serious way. We like when you leave ratings, reviews, things like that, help us grow the show. And yeah, we're looking forward to another season of Toronto Maple Leafs hockey sans Mitch Marner for the first time in a long time.